An mysterious ship was discovered deep at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, and the US Navy called a team of scientists to investigate. A helicopter took them to the ship in the middle of the ocean, where Colonel Barnes announced that they had found a spaceship. In fact, psychologist Norman had been invited to join the research team because he had previously written a paper on unidentified life forms, which the Navy was using as a guide. The spaceship was buried under 8 feet of coral, proving it had been there for 300 years, having fallen to Earth in 1709. They believed there could be life inside the ship, so the team of scientists was sent to establish contact, learn the origin of the alien creatures, and prevent the possibility of an invasion. Finally, Barnes revealed that the Navy's ultrasonic waves detected a low sound, indicating something was active inside the ship. As the team prepared to go underwater, Norman confessed to mathematician Harry that his report had actually been fabricated, and Harry agreed to keep this secret. The team then boarded a submarine, which took them to a facility called Habitat, where the Navy had built a base for research. When they descended deep enough, the team could see the enormous and impressive spaceship. A Navy diving team prepared a robot to open the spaceship's door, and the team of scientists began to move from the habitat to the spaceship. When the team reached the airlock door, they couldn't open it. Astronomer-physicist Ted used a hammer and chisel to try to break the doors, but this attempt was unsuccessful, only leaving a chip on the door. Harry felt strange because the spaceship wasn't scratched after the crash, yet simple tools could damage it. At that moment, marine biologist Beth noticed electromagnetic waves emanating from the door, so Barnes ordered everyone to turn back. However, the door automatically opened. They stepped inside, and Beth discovered footprints on the floor, indicating someone had been there before. The team split up to explore a wider area, and Norman privately confessed to Beth about his fake report, admitting that he had taken the idea from science fiction authors. The couple stepped onto an automatic platform, which moved them to the next level. "Here!" Beth screamed when she saw a corpse sitting in a chair. It appeared to be human, and had died from head trauma due to blunt force. The corpse was also holding a snack package labeled Smokehouse Almonds. They concluded that this must be an American ship. Then Beth checked the computer and was surprised to find the logs in English. The flight log was updated with the year 43, under the entry Unknown Input Event. When selecting this entry, a hologram image appeared around them, showing a spaceship entering a black hole. The couple then shared their discovery with the rest of the team. In response, Barnes led them to the cargo hold, where they discovered a massive sphere. Believing it might be a trap, Barnes decided to install a security camera there. Norman noticed that everyone was staring at the sphere, but no one appeared in its reflective surface. The team returned to the habitat and began discussing various theories. Ted believed the ship hadn't crashed, but was instead sucked into the black hole and traveled through time. At that moment, they received a notification about a storm on Earth, so they had to return immediately. Later, while in the break room, Harry told Norman that he predicted they would all die. He explained that the ship's entry into the black hole was marked as unknown in the log, because they couldn't report it from the start. Before going to sleep, Harry said he wished he could enter the sphere. Just minutes later, alarms went off, and Barnes checked the camera, discovering that Harry was heading toward the sphere. His reflection suddenly appeared clearly, and immediately Harry disappeared. Barnes announced that they would not return to Earth until they found Harry. Norman suited up in a diving suit and returned to the spaceship. He looked at the sphere, and suddenly Harry appeared on the floor. His biological signs were normal, but he didn't wake up. When Norman looked up again, his reflection appeared on the sphere just before the power went out, causing Barnes to lose sight of them. A few seconds later, the power returned, and Barnes realized they were using internal power, meaning the submarine had disappeared, and they would have to stay underwater for a while. While Norman carried the unconscious Harry back to the habitat, maintenance worker Fletcher went outside to reset the countdown clock on the mini-submarine. Barnes explained that they had to do this every 12 hours to notify the Navy they were still alive. If they forgot, the mini-submarine would automatically return to Earth. On the way back, Fletcher noticed a swarm of jellyfish swimming nearby. At first they looked beautiful, but then they came closer and began attaching themselves to her suit. Suddenly, Fletcher felt the jellyfish invading her body and tried to move away, but they continued to chase her. The damage caused to her suit allowed water to flood in, and eventually, Fletcher sadly drowned. The team brought her body back, and Norman shared that he had been attacked by jellyfish as a child, which was why he had always been afraid of them. Beth looked closely and discovered that this was a type of jellyfish she had never seen before. Sometime later, Barnes had a private conversation with Norman to reprimand him for not informing them about Beth's mental health history. It seemed he had just learned that she had previously attempted to take her own life. Barnes was worried she might pose a danger to the mission, and an argument broke out. But Ted interrupted, announcing that Harry had regained consciousness. The team gathered in the kitchen and watched Harry eat with enthusiasm. He praised the simple but delicious food and confirmed he had entered the sphere, though he didn't reveal how he had done it, which was strange because the sphere had no visible entrance. Harry took another bite, but when he realized it was fried squid, he started to panic. Ted performed the Heimlich maneuver to help him, but Harry explained that he wasn't choking. He just simply hated squid. A moment later, Jane called Ted over to the computer, as he had noticed something wrong. As they were trying to solve the issue, Harry approached and pointed to the numbers on the screen, asking Ted to check if they were binary code and decode it in a circular pattern like the sphere. Ted complied, and the whole team was shocked when they saw that the numbers were messages sent by someone named Jerry. This mysterious Jerry only said simple phrases like, "hello," and "I'm happy." But Norman was worried about what might happen if this entity became angry. Later, Norman heard a strange thumping noise outside the ship. He contacted another maintenance worker to ask about the sound, but received no response. Norman informed Barnes, and when Barnes checked, he discovered that the worker was outside the habitat. Norman and Beth went out to search for her, but they only found her dead, with the previous noise caused by her feet hitting the wall. Beth looked closely and was shocked to realize that her body had been crushed. As Norman and Beth brought the worker's body back to the station, several eggs suddenly fell to the ground. Barnes noticed an object on the sonar and ordered both of them to return quickly, as the strange entity was approaching. When they returned to the station, the entity disappeared from the sonar. Then Barnes and Norman went to the computer to discuss the plan for contacting Jerry. But at that moment, a message appeared asking, "What plan?" This meant that Jerry could hear everything they said. When Jerry stopped sending messages, the entity reappeared on the sonar, and eggs began to fall outside the habitat again. Beth pointed out that they should protect the sensor grid, so Barnes attempted to activate the high voltage current. Shortly after, the entity came close enough for the team to see it. It was a gigantic squid, which began slamming against the habitat. The noise did not bother Harry, who was sleeping in the room. Barnes realized the pressure was dropping, so he sent Ted to make repairs. However, when Ted turned the valve, he was suddenly electrocuted, slammed into the wall, and passed out. When Norman returned to turn the valve, the squid continued to attack, so Barnes ordered Norman to activate the high voltage current once again. As soon as Norman pulled the lever, the squid disappeared, but a fire also began to break out in the room. The team hurried to extinguish the fire, and Ted woke up to help. The emergency door was triggered, and Barnes had to block it with a box to prevent them from being trapped. Unfortunately, as he tried to move, the box slipped, and the door trapped Barnes to death. At the same time, part of the ceiling fell, pinning Ted down, trapping him. Ted told Norman to leave while the fire burned him alive before it extinguished itself. Once everything settled, Norman tried to contact Jerry to ask who had put out the fire, but Jerry only asked if Norman liked the squid and revealed that he could make more. Norman tried to explain that these phenomena were killing people, but Jerry just responded, telling him not to call him Jerry. Afterwards, Norman went to check on Harry, who was reading 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. When Norman mentioned the attack, Harry said he had slept through it. Harry then revealed that he really liked the book, but couldn't get past page 87 because it was too scary. Norman told Harry about all the deaths and the fact that most of their oxygen was gone, but Harry still maintained an odd, calm demeanor. Then Beth reminded Norman that they needed to reset the mini-sub. Norman admitted to her that he suspected Harry, and even thought that Harry might be responsible for the incidents, so he would do the reset himself, while Beth would keep an eye on Harry to prevent him from getting close to the mini-sub. Norman went outside and quickly carried out the reset, but on his way back, he noticed bubbles coming from his suit and called Beth for help. However, it was Harry who answered, explaining that he had a broken valve but would be fine. Norman continued moving, and when he reached the stairs, a snake suddenly attacked him. After a fierce struggle, the creature left, allowing Norman to safely return to the living area. A while later, the group noticed Beth entering the spaceship and asked her why. Beth explained that she was looking for food because they had run out, but Harry said there was plenty of food in the kitchen. Norman became angry and scolded Beth for not carrying out her surveillance duty as promised. He also mentioned the food in the kitchen, which made Beth go check the fridge and cupboards, but she was confused and swore that she had seen them empty earlier. Norman continued to scold her, and Beth lost her temper, accusing Norman of trusting Harry more than her. She also reminded him that he had never told them what he had done in the sphere. When Norman asked her if she had entered the sphere, Beth simply left in silence. Later, Norman picked up Harry's book from the floor, but when he looked up, he saw Harry still reading it. Panicked, Norman opened the cupboard and found more copies of the book, realizing that Beth was right. Norman went to the computer and asked Jerry about what was in the sphere, but this time the response was to stop calling it Jerry. In his desperate search for answers, Norman reviewed the code and realized that Ted had scrambled some letters during the decoding process. Finally, he discovered that the entity was actually Harry. Meanwhile, Beth left the living area and set up some explosives. When she returned, Norman told her that the entity was Harry, who was creating the strange creatures around them. He also asked her to read page 87 of the book, where it described a monster with impossibly long tentacles. The rest of the book was blank. Because Harry hated squids and was too afraid to continue reading the book, after entering the sphere, he gained the ability to turn those thoughts into reality. Both agreed that they needed to put Harry into a deep sleep to stop these phenomena. They searched the ship's medicine stock for sedatives and sneaked into the room, where Norman jumped on Harry to hold him down while Beth injected the sedative, knocking him unconscious. Later, a service announcement informed them that the weather had improved, and they could return in 6 hours. Norman went into the flooded bathroom to brush his teeth, and in the meantime, a snake in the water took the opportunity to crawl into his pants. When Norman shouted, Beth rushed into the bathroom and caught the creature, realizing it was the world's most venomous snake, something that shouldn't be underwater. Beth then told Norman to meet her in the lab, but when he arrived, she locked him inside. She explained that it was actually Norman who was creating the snakes, so she wanted to sedate him again. Norman didn't believe what Beth was saying, so she continued providing examples. Harry was still asleep, so the snake couldn't have come from him, and the jellyfish were Norman's fear, just like the squid was Harry's. When Norman refused to cooperate, Beth decided to drain the oxygen from the room, causing the lab to start flooding. Still stubborn, Norman dove to grab an oxygen tank and then escaped through a hatch. As Norman swam out of the living area, Beth checked the computer and discovered videos of Barnes interrogating her about her mental health and Norman yelling at her. This made her anxious, and she decided to leave the room. When Norman returned, he heard her crying and tried to comfort her, concluding that both of them had entered the sphere, just like Harry. Speaking of Harry, he woke up and demanded an explanation. Norman explained that their fears had given them the power to turn thoughts into reality, and this had also happened to the original crew, who likely killed each other in paranoia. At that moment, the computer announced that the explosives outside the living area had been activated, leaving them only 13 minutes to evacuate. Beth explained that these explosives were initially brought in to destroy the coral reef, but she had set them as a defense against the creatures. At first, she thought a new manifestation had triggered them, but then she realized it was her own thoughts, as she had once considered ending her life. Harry pointed out that the explosions would destroy everything, as the spaceship contained liquid hydrogen. The team immediately rushed toward the mini-submarine, but once inside, they couldn't start it. Suddenly, they were transported into the spaceship. The group began searching for an exit, but kept going in circles without making any progress. Finally, they stood in front of the sphere, and Norman's reflection told him to press the button. Realizing what was happening, Norman urged his friends to let go of their thoughts, and the group instantly reappeared in the mini-submarine. Norman pressed the button, and the submarine began moving toward the surface, escaping the explosion that would completely destroy the habitat. When the mini-submarine surfaced, the group underwent decompression and found a quiet place to talk. They couldn't tell the Navy the truth because no one would believe them, and the sphere was likely destroyed in the explosion. Beth pointed out that they still had the power, but she feared creating something dangerous, or that the power might fall into the wrong hands. When Norman said the power had already fallen into the wrong hands, Harry came up with the idea that they should use their power to make themselves forget everything they had discovered. This explained why the incident in the ship's log was marked as unknown. The three of them joined hands and concentrated on forgetting everything related to the mission and their powers. At that moment, their fears shot out of the ocean and into the sky at incredible speed, returning to outer space. When the scientists opened their eyes, they couldn't understand why they were holding hands. You have just watched the summary of the movie Sphere. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to catch our next videos. Thank you for watching.